An idea I often hear today is that we are at a uniquely important moment in history. Well, I guess every moment's unique, and frankly, I don't know whether it's this one or the next one that matters most. But like all of you, I do know that humanity faces some really major challenges, and most of them are of our own making. Whether it's Syria right now, whether it's places like the Congo, where suffering continues year after year, through to the tens of millions of people all over the world in search of a job and the simple dignity of being needed. Or the uncomfortable reality that the economic growth we need to generate all this employment is completely unsustainable without radical systemic change. Life looks pretty complicated and often ambiguous. And I, for one, find myself sometimes feeling deeply sad as I reflect on just how many mistakes and misunderstandings we humans make and the consequences that follow. And yet, in that tendency to see our own moment in the sun as a unique one, I think we often miss what's getting better. We rightly think of the 20th century as being a bloody one, with terrible wars and genocide. Yet before the days of nation-states, tribal warfare was 9 times as deadly, even as our own rather dismal recent history. Prehistoric man fared even worse, with 1 in 7 people meeting a violent death at the hands of another. And in medieval Europe, the murder rate was 30 times what it is today. So violent as the world is, it's much less so than it used to be. And we're also living much longer. At the beginning of the 20th century, life expectancy at birth globally was about 31 years. Today, the equivalent figure is 67. So whilst inequality is rising in many parts of the world, and I personally believe is one of the major issues of our time, global poverty actually halved in the last 25 years. In large part, of course, because of the rise of Asia, and in particular, China. So why then does the world today sometimes feel so overwhelming and so confusing, especially when we think about the future? I think a major source of our collective uncertainty is what's often called the Great Acceleration. And by that, I mean the incredible transformational changes that have happened at an accelerating pace, beginning first with the Industrial Revolution and then speeding up dramatically in the last 50 years. Let's start with population. For many centuries prior to the invention of industrial agriculture, global population never exceeded about 15 million people, and then began a steady rise. So by the mid-19th century, we'd reached 1 billion. By the 1970s, we were at 4 billion. Today, as we all know, there are over 7 billion people on the planet, and we expect to be well over 9 billion by 2050. With much of that increase taking place in the nations least able to cope with it. In large part, of course, this is down to improvements in sanitation and healthcare, which means that many of us live much longer, and a far smaller proportion of children die in infancy today than they did a century ago. So we have a population graph that looks like a hockey stick. And unsurprisingly, a lot of other data follows suit. From depleting fish stocks, to the loss of forests and of fresh water, to the rise in desertification and of CO2 in the atmosphere, and the growth in material consumption in just about everything. Graph after graph just takes off as we plot our impact on the planet. So great is the current rate of plant and animal species loss that, as my own children tell me, mankind is now in the process of contributing to the Holocene extinction, or the sixth mass extinction. An impact which geologists, if they're still around in a few thousand years, will be able to track through fossil records. So if we go back to those graphs that plot the growth of population, consumption, and ecological impact, there's another set of lines that follow a similar path. And they're the lines that track technological know-how, the rise of scientific knowledge, and the modern and postmodern world as we know it. One of them, of course, is Moore's Law, named after Gordon Moore, the co-founder of the company Intel. In essence, it states that the power of computing approximately doubles every 2 years. It was a prediction he made in 1965, and it's proven to be uncannily accurate. So processing speed, memory capacity, sensors, and even the number and size of pixels in digital cameras are all improving, increasing at exponential rates. Thanks to brain power, thanks to ingenuity and scientific breakthroughs in multiple fields, we've put ourselves on a fast track, capable even of changing the course of our own evolution by manipulating DNA. And yet, deep down, we know that something's wrong. We may be clever, but we're not yet wise.